should have had it. Let's see. Let's do LinkedIn and.
Hello, Ara.
Hello, Nikos. Yeah, I think it was the architecture of community that I ordered, and I believe it's arriving. The Leon Cruz book, the
Yes,
architecture of
well,
community,
this is
in a couple
his
weeks.
main book. Leon Creer's main book is The Architecture of Community. It is the old book, Architecture, Choice or Fate, with 2 new chapters that were added years ago.
I saw a
So,
lot of books came up when I typed his name, but okay, so one of them is an older version of the architecture of community.
yeah. The old version of The Architecture of Community is called Architecture, Choice or Fate. So Architecture of Community is the old book plus 2 new chapters.
And then he has some other ones that come up that are very rare. He has one.
Well, those are really for of historical interest. That's when he was starting his theoretical quest.
Oh, and then the book came up that you mentioned one time that he has a book on Albert Speer, which is kind of gutsy for him to write about that because it's a topic that people.
Well, yeah, he got into trouble for that, but that was recently republished.
So obviously, I'm guessing he doesn't talk about Albert Speer in a positive light. It's
Well, it is a dual and balanced presentation for whoever reads the book, but nobody's going to read the book because people are terrified of reading about Albert Speer. But what Leon did is to discuss the project, show that Speer was a talented architect, and also condemn Speer as a war criminal because he worked with Hitler.
yeah.
But
And the scale, as you mentioned, the scale of his
yeah,
buildings
yeah,
was
okay.
rather inhumane.
So I mean, it's a delicate balance to try to balance these things, but there is so much blood and death surrounding Speer that it's very difficult to try to make sense of his architecture.
I'm
And
not sure.
if you want my take on Speer, I have my own take on Speer.
Yeah, of course.
He was a talented architect who single-mindedly focused on the architecture of power. That's why he blended very nicely with Hitler, because Speer's buildings, the main buildings, are expressions of power. They're not nice. They're not nice architecture. They're the architecture of power meant to intimidate and to establish the authority of this type of architecture. So when you look at a photo, it sort of looks like, okay, semi-classical, but when you find a photo with people in it, you see that the people are tiny. So this is an exaggerated, stripped classicism that's made huge in order to intimidate you. It's not classical architecture. It's not what Nir Buras does or Leon Creer does. It is a hugely distorted scale to intimidate the person. So
And
Speer was,
you could argue that he's missing the fractal quality, because when you do
well,
like you stack the orders or something, it has the fractal quality. But him, it was just like one column from bottom to top of this massive thing.
exactly. So Speer was an intelligent master of propaganda architecture, which is evil. But he was very, an intelligent guy who intentionally did this.
Man. So I figured out the integration between StreamYard and Zoom a little bit late, so we didn't get to have the talk. What was his name?
Ettore Maria Mazzola.
Mr. Mazzola, yeah.
Yeah.
Ettoria is his first name?
Ettore.
Oh, Ettore Mazzola.
Yes.
But I have about, let me see, 54 screenshots from his talk.
Do you want to show them while I talk about them?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let me share. And then I have 24 screenshots from the lady who talked, who showed she did a restoration project, which I think you
Well, I
missed her
cannot
talk.
talk on that. You save it for another time.
Okay, but let's see, present, share. And yeah, I love that you had introduced me already to the uh,
Corviale.
Corviale, because yeah, since I had seen that building, I knew how inhumane it was and how what he was showing was a much better proposal.
Okay, start some screenshots and then I'll talk over them.
Where's Photoshop? Maybe I need to share my whole screen. Yeah, whatever. Okay, share whole screen. Sure. Okay. All right. So if I go back, oh no, this is the other one. If I go back to, oh, by the way, this is the thumbnail I used. It's the ceiling of it's a Borromini ceiling with some Christopher Alexander sketches superimposed. So. Yeah, the proposals he did were really nice.
He's a master. He should have gotten 3 or 4 international architecture awards, but he has not, because the architectural mafia keeps the awards for their buddies, their boys and gals.
So he showed this. There were things around the St. Peter's Basilica that have been demolished.
Oh yeah. But this has been
wow.
going on since the Second World War.
So it was like developer driven, just
no. Even Mussolini. See what you're showing. Mussolini demolished. This is in front of the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica. St. Peter's Basilica is way on the left.
It's here,
and you have the colonnade there, sort of towards the middle. You have the giant double colonnade.
Yes.
So there used to be very beautiful urban fabric, and Mussolini demolished that in order to build a very straight, wide road via the Conciliazione, I think. So now when you are walking or driving towards the Vatican, it's just a monotonous big road. And you don't have the sense of emerging from Rome into the Vatican, which is a separate city. But Mussolini did that.
I see.
Now, next slide. Go to the next slide. You see the historic urban fabric of Rome on top. Which is just perfectly evolved, and plazas and buildings with courtyards, in the streets, and there's a wonderful human scale. And look at what post-war urbanists did on the bottom. There's totally stupid imposition drawn on some paper, because these are 60s and 70s projects. Drawn on some paper, semicircles. Okay, these are totally inhuman.
I've been wondering because also Jane Jacobs mentioned this, that these might have come from Ebenezer Howard's Garden City, and people somehow thought it was a good idea.
This is the modernist destruction of the minds of architects. That you look at the project and you draw a formal design from the air, and that's supposed to be good. That's stupid. Look at the top. You look at Rome. It doesn't look like clean or orderly or formal on top, but it's a wonderful urban fabric because it is connected, and the buildings themselves are connected. On the bottom, it's purely formal. It is dead. It is dead and violent and dangerous. All of urbanism was screwed up because you had people like Corbusier getting in and messing up urbanism.
And things are so far away from each other and not walkable on the bottom.
Yeah.
What do you think about like New York City, where it looks kind of similar to the top, but it's not? It's actually just a grid. It's a very straightforward grid, and it's easy to navigate because you're on First Street or.
New York City is a city. Okay, you navigate it, you walk. The problems with New York City is that hyperdensity in Midtown, when the buildings become too tall, and in the financial district. That's a different problem. Here we're talking about the grid. There is a urban grid on the human scale on top, the top half of the picture, and then there is an inhuman it's not even urban fabric. It's just inhuman imposition of nonsense on the bottom that has destroyed the mind of urbanist and architecture students. Okay, move on to some more slides.
Yeah, so really great talk. That I mean, it's cool that. Oh, and he mentioned you a couple times also, and
I have many stories to tell. Let's
nice.
move fast.
Yeah. So you guys, you and him work together on reimagining that monstrosity. This one,
Right. Okay.
this
So
right
this
here.
is previous that. So that's the Corviale. This is 1 kilometer long. Okay, that line, that diagonal line, that's the building. I think it's 8 stories tall, 1 kilometer long, no bricks.
Yeah, how could anyone have
And
thought that was a good
this
idea?
idiot Mario Fiorentino, the architect in the 70s, no, in the 60s, yeah, 60s, 70s, just said there are going to be stores on the 4th floor. Well, to have a store, you need a store owner. No store owner is going to invest money to create a store on the 4th floor because nobody's going to go there. So the 4th store of this 1 kilometer long 4th floor filled with squatters, illegal settlers, where the stores were supposed to be. How stupid can you get? Well, that's the problem we're facing because architecture stopped being a profession after the Second World War. So people are incredibly stupid. And if you have no feedback and no reaction from the public, then people, the so-called professional, will do all sorts of crazy things, like this Corviale. Now, I have a long story with Ettore Mazzola. We tried to do this project for over the last 30 years. At every step, we're blocked. The Italian government comes in and says, we're going to invest 20 million or 30 million euros to upgrade the Corviale. Stay here, please.
This one?
No, stop fooling with that drop-down thing. So what they do is they take public money and they spend 20 or 30 million euros, and they pay somebody to paint the walls of the Corviale. Instead of fixing the stupid thing, they just paint it and plant some trees. The trees die very soon. The paint discolors in 3 years, and they do the same trick. They refuse to change the building structure, the urban fabric. Now go forward, please. Ettore proposed a complete demolition of the Corviale in pieces. So he was going to build the new pieces on the south of this, on the bottom, move the residents slowly to the new pieces. As soon as pieces were vacated of the original line, demolish it, have on site the machines for grinding the old concrete from the demolition in order to recycle and use it to build the new parts.
Oh.
So after only a few months, or 1 or 2 years at maximum, you would have the entire thing recycled with most of the original cement recycled in order to, and Ettore is a master at urban planning. So his final product is human scale with plazas, internal streets, connected, and a big area to the south that's an open public park.
Yeah, it's really good.
So there's a phenomenal project, but at every step, he and we, there were a group of us.
So the government is saying, we want a new proposal, but don't demolish the building. Leave the building and just do a new proposal around it.
No, the government, which is relying on the propaganda of the architectural establishment in Italy, is saying this is a sacred building because it's built by famous architect Mario Fiorentino, refusing to accept that this guy was a total idiot. So we cannot destroy this monument to modern architecture. And still today, in the architecture schools all over Italy, they show the Corviale as a wonderful example of modern architecture. It is an abysmal failure. Okay, so it's inconceivable. The architecture schools are just totally crazy. They're influencing the government. The government blocks everything. And then, of course, the citizens are complaining. So what the government is what I told you a few minutes ago. The government gives, say, 20, 30 million in order to do a new paint job and plant some more trees instead of fixing the thing. So it is the Band-Aid treatment, because they will not allow this monstrosity to build to be demolished. Okay, let's go further.
Oh, should we go to the other projects, or should we?
Well, no, I have a story for this.
I think that the next images they go to a different project. Oh, wait, oh no, is this also the reimagining of the Corviale?
Yeah. This is
the same project.
Ettore's. This is what it will look like after it's rebuilt. I mean, these are gorgeous images. So we had an informal a seminar where Ettore presented these images, organized by an Italian newspaper, and we did that, and it was recorded, and then the Italian government paid for an international conference that Ettore was going to present this. So he did all the cost. So stop, because now this is the next project.
Yeah,
that's go back to the Corviale. And so this was organized by the government in Rome. We got funding. I arrived with my family, with my entire family, 2 daughters, wife, and mother-in-law. In Rome, people, some mayors came from Paris, who not from Paris, from all over France and Belgium, who had done new urbanist projects. They were going to talk about their experiences. People came from all over Italy, people from Germany, I think from Britain. And I received a phone call in the morning of the conference. My wife and mother-in-law and daughters were going to go sightseeing, and then I was going to go to the conference venue. So I received a phone call, and they said, "Nikos, I'm sorry, the conference is canceled." Why is the conference canceled? Because the governor of the Lazio region, which includes Rome, the governor is higher than the mayor of Rome in power. The governor received a phone call last night from a powerful entity demanding that the conference be canceled. So I asked, who can be powerful enough to order the governor to cancel our conference? And and we're here, and money has been spent. We have the brochures printed, paper brochures, thousands of euros. He said, "Sorry, even I don't know, but it's better not to investigate."
Oh, yeah.
He said, I was told by the Assessore di Urbanistica, the director of urbanism for Rome, Teodoro Buontempo, that this is final. Teodoro Buontempo was on our side. He was an organizer. In fact, I went with Ettore in Ettore's car a few months before, when I was in Rome, to Teodoro Buontempo, and we discussed this conference. So he said, "Well, I will find out from Teodoro Buontempo." Well, Teodoro Buontempo unfortunately got sick and died from natural causes. He wasn't shot. And he took the secret to the grave with him. So we don't know which power blocked our conference. But that's the last time I went to Italy, because after that, I was just totally disgusted. Okay, let's go to the Zen.
Sure. Maybe having this building up might serve as like an example of what not to do. Maybe having it there, people will start seeing.
No. There are so many cities around the world. There are all those horrible buildings in Paris, where the riots occur every few years. Having a bad building is not enough to give an example. There are so many around the world. Nobody ever learns from a bad example. They copy a bad example. Okay, so wait.
Which one?
Go back to. These are beautiful social housing projects from the 1920s in Rome. So showing that it is possible to build social housing for poor people, middle class and poor working class people that are just gorgeous. You want to pay $1 million to get an apartment like this. This is built this is social housing. And all of these lessons learned from the 20s and 30s, even with the fascists, were totally wiped out because the modernists came in with these crazy ideas of building these giant blocks. It's a fanaticism It is a destructive fanaticism. These giant blocks of, the modernist impressions of power. And this is exactly the same that Albert Speer did, except that, he was using it for a totalitarian regime, whereas the modernists wanted it to apply this to the poor people for the social housing. Okay, let's go forward to the Zen. The Zen is another horrible social housing project in Palermo, Italy. So this is it. I've never been there. I've been to Palermo, but I never went to the Zen project. You're not supposed to go there unless you have an escort, an armed escort. It's so dangerous. So this was designed by Vittorio Gregotti, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, a friend of mine, Franco Purini, who's now very, very old, he helped Vittorio Gregotti create these extremely ugly buildings and horrible urban layout. It's just inhuman layout. They were applying the principles of inhuman urban design, and I thought they were doing good. No, they weren't. This is just a piece of garbage. And it's one of the most dangerous places in Palermo. The police don't even go there. So this is a Zen. That's the aerial view. Look. No, this is not the Zen. That's something sort of okay. Yeah, sort of okay. Not great, but sort of okay. No, the Zen is totally monotonous. So what happened is that, I was there, and some residents, these are very poor people, residents of the Zen, put together money themselves and asked, Dr. Mazzola, we will pay your fare and your hotel. Please come and help us to redesign the Zen. So Ettore was very happy to work, for nothing. They didn't offer a fee. They didn't have any money. So he went to the Zen. He was helped by one of our local friends, Ciro Lomonte, who ran for mayor, did not get elected. So Ciro Lomonte helped Ettore Mazzola, and they went to the Zen. And so Ettore spent a lot of time and made a wonderful, complete study for how to do the same thing. Demolished, piece by piece, demolished the Zen and rebuild it with a beautiful human-scale urban fabric. And of course, nobody paid any attention to that.
I bet they were looking at, when this was being designed, looking at the Villa Savoie and the Unité de Habitation, because you see a lot of Corbusier influence here.
It is. And Gregotti won a prize for this, I think.
So when they designed this, were they weren't thinking these were going to be the slums. They thought these were going to be like more luxurious or something, and then they ended up becoming like the ghetto or the slums or whatever they ended up becoming.
When modernists design things, they don't give a damn about what's going to happen to them or about the people who live there. They design formalist schemes to get their own ego up. So Ettore Mazzola showed the video earlier today.
Oh, yeah.
When
who was being interviewed? Where they said that, it's for the proletariat, it's a nice building. They're like, would you live there? And then he said, no. It's not for me. I'm not a proletariat.
That was the chief architect. Oh. That was Vittorio Gregotti, with a guy with a beard, who designed this, along with my friend Franco Purini, who was then very young. But Gregotti was the famous architect. So they asked him, would you live there? He said, why should I live there? I'm not a proletariat. I'm a famous architect. Why should I want to live there? So you see, the modernist ethos, the modernist ethos is that the people who are going to live in your buildings are just garbage. They're like ants or cockroaches. You build what you like to express your cult visions of, don't show this, go forward.
I was curious about what he showed here, because he said that they illegally added these balconies.
Well, this is sort of a so-so housing project. It's not terrible like Zen or Corviale.
Yeah, it's not as bad.
It's not nice either.
But he said these balconies were added on later.
Yeah, illegally? the stupid architect didn't put balconies, and Italians love to have balconies. So these were added after the fact, and the people, called some some amateur engineers who drill holes and put these half beams there. But this is very dangerous. It's not
Yeah, that's what I
floating.
was thinking. Like, because if it's not designed to handle this load,
No,
this
no,
weight,
no.
that's not a good
It's
idea.
very dangerous. But the stupid architect refused to put balconies.
Well, hopefully no one walks on these balconies and they just keep these plants here.
No, no, they have to go out on the balcony sometimes. Anyway, let's go on forward.
Oh, and then they illegally added these gardens, which I mean, the gardens at least don't pose a threat, unless if the moisture from the soil can get into the walls here. Which
This is just getting to the stupidity. Even
yeah,
something that's not so bad, it lacks the fundamental qualities that make an apartment complex livable and human for the children to enjoy. These stupid architects are so arrogant and so ignorant, and they're not taken to task. Instead of put in jail and fined and having their offices closed, they're giving prizes. Please go on.
I want to
Forward.
make this point where we were looking at the building last time by the Jewish architect from where was he from? From Germany? Who? Philip Johnson? Oh, Eric Mendelsohn. We were looking at Eric Mendelsohn, and there was the project where in the original one there was a planter box on the bottom, and then they had taken it out. But obviously the architect wanted a planter box, and then I remembered after that something happened a few years ago that so I designed the project with a planter box, and we had it permitted, and then later the planter box was like aligned with other elements of the building. And then the client says, "Hey, my contractor says we need to remove the planter box. It's going to be too much money. We don't want it." And I didn't want to do it. And then they just got someone else to apply for the permit to remove it.
Okay.
And they ended up removing it. So I mean, it's not always the architect who. I mean, maybe the architect wanted to have a garden, but I mean, it comes down to.
Look, you're confusing two opposite things. What I pointed out last time is that Eric Mendelssohn's building was really beautiful for a modernist building. That's as beautiful as it gets.
But when they took out the planter box on the ground floor, it didn't look as it ruined.
No,
it didn't have the
ruined it.
bottom. It just had a middle and a top now.
It
Whereas before it
ruined
had
it.
the bottom, middle, and the top. But they removed the bottom.
Whoever made alterations for whatever reason was so ignorant of design that they ruined, a gorgeous building, historically gorgeous building.
It wasn't in the original photographs. It's a very nice building.
Okay, so skip all of this. This is the original Zen. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Early. Okay, so you see,
yeah.
Look from the top. This is the modernist obsession, sort of Nazi obsession with order.
Yeah, you could see it's out of scale. It's too massive.
Yeah. These huge buildings, all lined up, and they lead to a toxic environment. And as Ettore said, all the children there eventually grow up and are taken over by the mafia. They're recruited by the mafia. It's such a horrible, toxic place that the young people have no future.
He did a lot of drawings. Do you know if Ettore Mazzola? If Ettore Mazzola did all these drawings himself, or if he had his students?
Did. Oh yeah. He's a master draftsman.
I wonder if he had his students working on some of these also, or because it's a really large quantity of drawings.
That I cannot tell you.
Yeah, but they're really good.
We are talking about these projects we did. I did not participate, but I was part of the group. We're talking about 25 to 20 years ago. So I used to go every year to Italy between 2000 and 2010, and then I stopped going because everything collapsed. All our projects collapsed. All our projects were blocked. In Italy, you go through various layers. You penetrate, the beautiful environment being in Italy. And it's so wonderful and beautiful, and everything is so gorgeous, and the food is so nice, and the wine is great, and then you go deeper and you see there's an inefficiency, and there is the bureaucracy of the state. And then you go deeper and you see that there is a fanatic cult that holds all the architecture schools, that refuses to allow any changes. And then you dig deeper and you find that this is linked with secret powers in the government. And you go even deeper and you see that the government is controlled by the mafia and by other secret organizations like the P2, Masonic organizations that control mafia money, and you go deeper and deeper. And that when you see that, it's frightening. So it was so frightening, I never went back to Italy again, because these are powers that control what really happens in Italy. And ordinary people, even ordinary Italians, don't see these powers.
By the way, I looked up the 7 articles that you said that you had repurposed parts of your dissertation for. They didn't show up online. You said they were published in an article. Maybe it was physical print. They're not in a physical print journal. It wasn't online.
I did my thesis in 1981. My first articles are on mathematical physics and quantum field theory. They're all paper journals, Journal Mathematical Physics. They're not available online. You belong to a new generation, Ara. Those scientific articles were all published in print. You have to go to the library and make a Xerox of them.
You said it was the Journal of Mathematical Physics?
Yeah, so why are you interested in that? You cannot understand it.
I'm just curious. I mean, it would, maybe it's fascinating, or maybe it's
No,
I'm gonna get
no.
it's gonna be like a different language. But I mean, I think it would be cool to just see the dissertation you wrote.
I'm
Algebra.
telling you, it's a different era. Everything was published on paper.
Okay, maybe I'll go to the library. I'll try to find it.
You're wasting your time. What are you going to do when you find it? I could make Xeroxes and send you, but I think you're wasting your time. Anyway, you and I now are used to finding stuff online to read.
Yeah.
But that's only been true for the last 5 or 6 years. Stretching it a bit, going back 10 years, but that's it.
I mean, so you mentioned there that you wrote about algebraic structures in quantum field theory, and there's something about that that's been kind of really fascinating to me, where it looks like the particles go through 2 slits at the same time, and as soon as they put a camera to try to see what's happening, it doesn't do it, and it's just really weird to me. And so they take out the camera and it does it again, and they put in the camera and it doesn't do it.
It is weird even to the most intelligent physicists of today and in the past. And Einstein didn't like it, but nobody has explained it yet. But that's quantum physics, the paradoxes of quantum physics. Anyway, that has very little to do with architecture.
Does it? Maybe.
Okay, so look, we're wasting time. Let's go back to architecture.
Okay.
So the famous conference on the Corviale, on the reconstruction of the Corviale, was not only Ettore Mazzola. There were some other similar plans to reconstruct, sort of demolished and rebuild the Corviale into human scale. And there were other people. I think Gabriele Tagliaventi from Bologna had the project, and there were several that were going to present, because it wasn't going to be just Ettore Mazzola that would have taken an hour. There were a whole bunch of different people who were going to present a restructure of the Corviale, plus the people who came from other countries were going to present their built projects, human scale, and how much they improved the city, to show that what a success it is. So none of that took place. But then the next day, my friends came to visit me in the hotel, because I didn't get to see them, because we didn't go to the conference venue. They called me and they said, "There's no conference, don't bother to come." So they came to visit with me. We went out for a coffee, and I said, "Well, how about my reimbursement?" And I said, "Sorry, Nikos, no reimbursement." I said, "But you promised me, you wrote me, I have this letter that there's money from the government to pay my fare, and I'm paying my family. But, you pay for my fare and my hotel." And they said, "No, according to the Italian law, the conference never took place. Therefore, you don't get your reimbursement. You're stuck with all your expenses." So I had to pay from my pocket for this family trip to Rome that I was expecting to be partly covered because of a conference.
Well, I mean, at least you got to have a trip to the arguably the greatest city on earth. Another trip. I mean, so wait, what was it?
Look, I'm going to say something else. I
Yeah.
may get you into trouble. So, the friend who came and I was having coffee with was Stefano Serafini, one of our collaborators there. So I exploded. You know, it wasn't his fault, but I exploded. I said, you know, I'm out of pocket several €100 because I came with a family. He said, Nikos, if I were you, I would just swallow it. Because I was approached by somebody recently who pretended to be a journalist, but wasn't a journalist, dressed in a black shirt. And he said, you know, you guys, your group, you better be careful because you're stirring up problems. And maybe one of you will be found floating in the Tiber River one morning. So stop stirring up trouble. And I told him, Stefano, you must be kidding. He said, no, this is serious. You know, we are stirring up trouble, which is what we wanted to do, but now we are getting threatened. So we really have to stop everything that we're doing. So I never went back to Italy. Now, poor Ettore, whom you heard this morning, lives in Rome, has to put up with this. It's almost like a fascist state as far as architecture is concerned. You know, he lives in Rome. He practices in Rome. He has to put up with this. He has to work within this pressure and restriction. And the universities don't invite him to lecture. He works for an American university. The University of Notre Dame is an American university and has its small campus in Italy, in Rome, where they send students for 6 months to look around Rome, and then Ettore teaches them there. But Italian universities don't ask him to lecture, and he's one of the most important architects and urbanists in Italy today.
It seems like you all know each other. Everyone who's arguing for humane urbanism, like it's like a small. I mean, I'm not that it's small. It's kind of it's a good sized community, but it's like you all know each other.
Well, in Italy, I told you I would go once or twice a year for 10 years. We developed a nice little group, and then all that ended with the cancellation of the Corviale conference and the threats.
Oh, this Jane Jacobs sketch. I kept thinking of it when he was showing his transformation of the Corviale, the
Yeah.
need for small blocks.
Yes.
And she had a genius sketch. Here.
Incidentally, you know, I have written a very important book on urbanism.
I need to buy that book again. I had that book, and I don't know what happened to it. I've been looking for it lately.
Well, hope somebody stole it and is reading it.
Maybe I have one of your other ones. This one, Algorithmic Sustainable Design. But yeah. I really liked the principles of urban structure too. I should
well, it's a very good book.
And I have your Theory of Architecture as an ebook. That's also really good.
Okay.
Is that also available in physical print? Are they all available in both physical and ebook?
Yeah. They're all available as paper books. Some are available as ebooks. I have to check.
And then this just came in. So you mentioned that this was Christopher Alexander's PhD dissertation, reworked. Yeah. I haven't read through any of it yet. I just looked at the images. There are some really interesting.
He drew those by hand.
Nice.
That's India ink drawn by hand.
But does this translate to like built fabric, or I should really?
It's for you to read. This is a classic in the computer science community.
Oh.
No architect has ever read it.
I was thinking it looks like a proton, neutron, electron, like that type of thing.
Yes. Well, you know, Christopher studied physics and mathematics like me.
So he did an undergrad in architecture, and then he did a master's in mathematics.
At the same time.
Oh, he did it at the same time. And then when he did his PhD. His PhD was in architecture.
Yes.
Oh, Nir sent me his PhD dissertation. was like 300 pages.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was. He wrote a lot about. I was skimming through it. He wrote a lot about Palestine, like local architecture in Palestine and in Israel. Like
Uh-huh.
the maybe not all the famous buildings, but he wrote about what's happening, like some obscure buildings in those areas, housing
Uh-huh.
projects.
Wow. No,
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, his. Oh, and then I went to the last class too. Last week's they were showing train stations. That guy is really good. Well, the other instructor he has at CPI.
Which guy? Furness.
Funes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, he's excellent.
I wonder how him and Nir found each other.
We're all part of a big family that exists on the margins of dominant architecture.
Yeah.
Now, Furness works for a traditional architecture firm in London, that has very good projects. They do very, very nice things. You never see them in the news, but they do excellent buildings, classical style buildings.
That's awesome. I connected with one of the students of the CPI, and we were talking. And so he works for a firm, and his firm does very contemporary design, but he's interested in classical design. So he's part of the CPI, and he's getting some of that. But
Good.
in his work experience, it's all super contemporary stuff.
Okay.
So Jane Jacobs, Christopher Alexander.
Okay. Anything else before we wrap up?
Dun, dun, dun. Oh, 3D accretive fractal castle. Scaling symmetry. I'm reading from your book.
That's mine. Yeah, that's mine.
Algorithmic sustainable design. The scaling symmetry creates coherence. This is an interesting. Wow. The application of the Menger sponge, it can create. It's like it can create an infinite amount of, because you apply. I hadn't really seen it, but yeah. So this castle, it's basically,
Yeah.
you're constantly subdividing. Oh, it's what you were describing. You start with the 9 squares, and then you could keep subdividing, and take it to infinity.
Okay, but look, let's discussion. Either we end or we discuss things that are good for the audience, our faithful viewers who like this program so much.
So, what do you think about 2-to-1 ratio? So, Nir mentioned that windows and doors should be height 2 width 1, or you could slightly do it longer, slightly taller.
There is no fixed ratio. What Nir mentioned is that as you go up in stories, the windows should get smaller.
Oh,
which
yeah.
no modernist does. You see, all modernist facades have the same shape, size window. That's wrong. As you go higher in the stories, look at Nir's buildings. The difference. It's a small difference, but it's important psychologically. You have smaller windows as you go up, but everything has to be aligned to keep the symmetry. So that's what Nir mentioned. The proportional ratio of the window, it can vary within some accepted ratios that are considered beautiful. And it also depends upon the width of the window frame, so all that,
right.
That can be determined according to the individual cases. There is no strict formula.
So you argue that a thicker window frame is better than a thinner one, which
Absolutely.
I'm starting to agree with.
It is one of Alexander's 15 properties, wide frames. Things are defined because of a wide frame. And if there's a thin frame, it's flimsy. It doesn't define the interior. If there's no frame, it's horrible. And what did the modernists do? Eliminated frames. They did this. This is a perversion, makes you feel uneasy. Everything the modernists did is a perversion to make you feel uneasy, and it's done deliberately.
A lot of times, the standard windows people go to is the horizontal sliding window. But
that's the worst possible thing, because horizontal windows make you feel uneasy.
Yeah. So you have to switch to the double hung, which is it slides this way. So it's just a different window mechanism.
Look, I have just published a paper on windows, the shape of windows.
Oh yeah, I saw it. It's on it's oh, I linked it in one of the videos.
Well, link it again. It's a whole paper on windows that shows how the modernist and all of today's contemporary architects have the wrong shape and the wrong orientation of the windows. It creates anxiety. And they stupidly copy one another. The most elemental things. You have a discipline where the most elementary mistakes are made and repeated over and over and over again. How can people be so stupid? How can people be so ignorant and obvious? And they're stubborn. They refuse to learn, even though it's pointed out. They just keep at it. It has become religious fanaticism to repeat these anxiety-inducing architectural typology. So we have buildings all over the world that create anxiety. And the public is like a pack of sheep. They just go meh, meh. They accept the stuff. They don't say anything.
I came across something recently that was very intriguing to me. That there's in their concrete and a lot of the stuff that we build, there is radiation that comes out in some of the rocks that are used.
Yeah. That's a separate problem. I'm not.
Yeah, it is. Hello? Oh.
Okay.
You cut off for a second.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it is a separate problem, but it's really strange that, I mean.
Well, you or I cannot address that problem now. We can discuss design issues.
Yeah, but I thought it was interesting how in the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament, like in those old scriptures, and even in the Quran also, when they describe people from, say, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, they live to be 500 years old, 600 years old, 700 years old, 800 years old. And it seems like maybe we were closer to creation and the time of creation, so the earth hadn't become as toxic, so people were living longer, and then we didn't have all the radiation.
No. Ara, you are.
So do you think people didn't actually live that long back then?
You're going to turn off our readers. The truth is, based on anthropologists, is that our ancestors lived shorter because there was no health care. There were many diseases, many wars, and so people lived shorter lives.
Maybe they lived shorter, but maybe if we go far enough back on a long enough timeline, there was a point where they lived longer.
No. Okay. Don't talk nonsense. You're going to discredit yourself.
Okay.
Our ancestors lived shorter. That's why we have a problem today with aging diseases. People like me starting to get older. The human body evolved to live, say, 45 years. So people who are 80 today have all sorts of aging diseases. Well, God or evolution did not foresee the aging diseases because everyone was dead before they got to that age. Okay, our ancestors would die before age 45.
But I mean, I think the order of the universe does lead to intelligent design. Because it's just too much of a. We all have 2 hands with 5 fingers on each hand, 2 eyes, and this pot, and we have this sun with all these planets who are that are just orbiting around the sun perfectly. It's like, is this all just random?
No, it's not random. Have you read volume 4 of Christopher Alexander's book, The Nature of Order?
I got all 4 on ebook. So I also wanted to ask you about those books. So maybe I'll start with volume 4.
Well, volume 4 addresses the religious question.
Oh.
the place of man in the universe created by God, not the God of the Bible or the Quran, but a God of the intelligent universe, the order in the universe. That may answer some of your questions. This is a profound book.
Okay, so book one, so Nature of Order, book one is called The Phenomenon of Life.
Yes.
Book two is called The Process of Creating Life.
Yes.
Book three is called A
A
Vision.
vision of the living world.
Yes. And book four is called The Luminous Ground.
Yes. So for religious questions, you read book 4.
Wow.
And then we can discuss those.
Nature of
So
Order.
the short answer to the question you try to ask is that yes, there is an order to the universe, and those who respect it realize that there is an order and it keeps humans from just being total savages. It explains the wonderful creativity of human beings and how that links into the order of the universe and the beauty in the universe. And it also explains how arrogant psychopaths, like famous architects of the 20th and 21st centuries, want to destroy all the order of the universe in order to boost their own ego and accumulate money and fame. So this is a dangerous conclusion. That's why it is not talked about. And that's why Christopher Alexander was declared to be totally crazy.
But it's not just the architects. In Jane Jacobs' books, it seems like she is kind of pointing the finger at the urban planners who are deciding the sizes of the blocks and the sizes of the property lines.
Well, the urban planners, where do the urban planners of the 20th century come from? They come from architecture schools. You see, they were trained in the Bauhaus schools. The Bauhaus philosophy is you don't care about the persons who have to live in the city. You impose your will. Just like Albert Speer wanted to create grandiose schemes, you impose your will. You don't care about these people. They're no people. These are just cockroaches. You create something grand and powerful and dominating, and then the people have to put up with it. And if it's even sadistic, like some architects we know, you get a perverse pleasure out of causing harm to these people who have to live and work in your building.
Yeah, I think it seems like the Corviale is the worst example of that.
There are many bad examples all over the world.
There's Corbusier's Unité de Habitation, which I mean, it's not good, but it's not as bad as the Corviale. It seems
It's not much better. It's not much better, except that stupid architect lovers buy those apartments in the Unité. So it's well kept because wealthy people spend money to refurbish those apartments. They're terrible apartments. You know, there's one big window at the end of the apartment, and that's all the light there is. It's horrible glare everywhere in the apartment. You can't see anything. It's just dark. And you look at, the window, it's all glare. It's horrible. Only an idiot could have done that, or a lunatic like Le Corbusier. I told you about the Unité de Habitation. Le Corbusier wrote a book on it, saying how it comes out mathematically with his modular scheme. He says he has the modular scheme. Well, the modular scheme is absolute garbage. Corbusier knew nothing about mathematics. A 6-year-old school child knows more mathematics than Le Corbusier did.
That was exactly Frank Lloyd Wright's critique of Le Corbusier. He said, "Oh, he did a grid system and he called it the modular, like it was something new." He's like, "Oh, well, I did that in kindergarten." So Frank Lloyd Wright had a huge critique of Corbusier.
Well, that's one point. The second point is that my friend Malcolm Millais, who wrote an excellent book on the failures of modernism, actually went to the Unité de Habitation. He rented a hotel, and he went for several days with a big tape measure and measured all the dimensions. And then he computed all the ratios, supposedly, that Le Corbusier did. And he found that Le Corbusier was just lying, made things up. There was
Whoa.
no correspondence at all to the numbers from the modular. Corbusier was just a lunatic. He made things up. He was hallucinating, a pathological liar.
Yeah. It seems like he had a few interesting ideas about brise soleil and letting in light and air and stuff.
Don't talk
But
to me about Le Corbusier. Okay, let's end. Let's
no, no,
end.
no. But I mean, I was just gonna go to that. He wasn't a great artist because you've seen his version of the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man is an amazing drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, and
Yes,
then
I know.
Le Corbusier had his version of it, which is like so out of proportion. You've seen
Yeah,
him,
yeah, yeah. Stupid thing.
yeah. So I think Corbu used like his person for his buildings but it's like when you look at it, like the Vitruvian Man it's the circle and the square, and then there's like beautifully drawn a human, and that was going back to Vitruvius arguing for human scale architecture a long time ago. But then yeah, Corbu's drawing of his version of it, it was like totally like a first grade stick figure.
Okay, and for concluding statements.
Concluding statements. Just gratitude for everything you guys are exposing me to. It was a great session with the CPI today and last week too. I have a bunch of screenshots from last week also. When I saw some of what his students were doing, they were doing a very large scale projects. Um, basically, kind of similar to the project that Nir showed us that he was developing. His students are doing a similar scale, splitting up a large block into smaller blocks and doing mixed use, like 5-story projects. It seems. I mean, some less, some more. But yeah, a lot of gratitude. A lot. I'm learning a lot, and hopefully other people are too.
Okay, one last question to end today's session.
Yeah.
You seem to be learning a lot, and you seem to be learning a lot about architects and urbanists who you didn't know before.
Yeah.
Have you heard any of these people before?
Like who?
All the people you met and listened to recently. Have you heard any of them when you were in Colombia?
I mean, I knew of Jane Jacobs. I hadn't really looked at
I
her.
mean, Jane Jacobs was dead in 1970.
Yeah.
No, but Nir and
No.
Ettore Mazzola and
No.
Gabriele Tagliaventi and Pablo Funes, and, Leon Krier even.
Oh, Leon Kerr, I knew of,
Mm.
because I had heard Peter Eisenman mention him. I went to a few Peter Eisenman talks, and I would write down everything he would say that I wasn't familiar with, and I would look it up. So I knew Leon Krier because of that.
What an irony that you heard about Leon Krier from Eisenman's mouth.
Yeah, I learned a lot listening to Eisenman, but he has some really weird ideas. I mean, I heard other people talk about the Eisenman, other like famous philosophers and other people, and they would say that after Peter Eisenman would leave, because Peter Eisenman loves to talk to people about their fields, and there was like another architect and philosopher and stuff, and after they left, the architect was like, I have no idea what Peter Eisenman was saying about what you're doing, and then the philosopher was like, yeah, I don't know what he was saying either. But
okay, yeah, let's not knock Peter.
no, I'm not. I think he's genius. I've learned so much listening to him. And I've heard you say some nice things about him too, that your students visited him and he was nice to them and gave them a tour.
He was nice to my students. That's and I stop at that. And he's an old man now. He must be very old. And
yeah,
I don't want to say anything bad about him. So let's end our.
But yeah, I was familiar with Eric Mendelsohn and a lot of let's see who else. I mean,
but as far as Peter Eisenman, I cannot deny that he has been in contact with many students, and I'm convinced that he has confused these students. He has not made them into architects.
Of course. And there's another group. There's this group that's arguing for humane, livable architecture and urban design. There's another group that's arguing for. Well, no, then there's the famous architects who are at the top of this whatever this architecture system world. And then there's another group that's arguing that what we're learning in architecture school doesn't help us in the workforce. We're learning all these softwares that we don't. We're learning Rhino and 3D Max, but in the real world we're using Revit. And the architecture school, it's not helping. And then Peter Eisenman would say, architecture school is supposed to be a speed bump. If architecture school is a highway to the workforce, something is wrong. Architecture, and he argued. I mean,
yeah, that's ridiculous. Architecture school should help somebody towards a career. Otherwise, why spend your time and money going to school?
Yeah, that's true.
Architecture school does not prepare architects to be architects, does not teach them architecture. Okay, if architecture school taught students how to be architects, then they would come out. And then there is this transition, the bump between finishing school and entering a studio and practice. You have to learn some practical things that you don't know from architecture school. But what happens now is that somebody graduates and knows nothing about architecture and then goes to start working in a firm, totally unprepared.
Yeah, it is a problem.
It's a waste of money and time.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the way the world is going, for some professions, obviously university makes a lot of sense if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be that type of thing. But it seems like in a lot of other fields, school is kind of a speed bump.
No, but look, you're stuck because you have to have a degree in architecture, even though you're not taught to be an architect, in order to be able to take your certification exams. In order to practice, you have to pass your exams. Those have nothing to do with architecture school. That's a separate board that administers the exam.
There's a way now for people to become licensed architects without having any of the education, any of the schooling. Even you don't have to go to a accredited school. You
really?
Don't have to go to, yeah. So there's like the 2.5, 3 years of whatever of work experience you need. If you don't have the education requirement, the work experience is just doubled. So you just need more work experience, and arguably that's a much better path. So you could become a licensed architect.
Okay, but
isn't that what Frank Lloyd Wright did? Because I think Frank Lloyd Wright
he had no degree in architecture.
Yeah, he didn't have a degree, but he became a licensed architect. So I think.
Yeah, but look. Let's go back to this. This is a catch-22. This is a vicious cycle, because no architecture studio is going to hire a young person to work, even though just to make Xerox copies, unless they have an architecture degree. So you need an architecture degree to get hired by some architecture studio to work there for 2 or 3 years so that you can take your licensing exams. It's a vicious circle.
I could see it happening where someone graduates high school and then they go to a firm and they're like, "Can I apprentice for you for free?" And they apprentice for free.
No. Columbia graduates and Harvard GSD graduates go to a firm and beg, "Can I apprentice for free?" Because there are no jobs.
Yeah, but they're begging to go to Peter Eisenman's firm and Norman Foster's firm and Frank Gehry's firm.
There are no jobs, so all these young architects work for nothing. It would be better if they drove an Uber in New York City. They work for nothing for years. And you don't hear from the hundreds who just give up, go work in a restaurant and give up on architecture.
Yeah, most of my classmates are in other fields now.
Well, that tells you.
Yeah.
It's a horrible system, but it still attracts architects for the wrong reasons. Not because these young people want to learn architecture. They don't realize that when they go to architecture school, they've been taught selective things that don't make them good architects. But they're told, you come to architecture school, take all these courses, and you'll become a famous architect, like Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha. And they believe it, but if they're stupid enough to believe it, then they deserve what they get.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. In our studio courses, we're designing stadiums and concert halls and massive museums. And it's like, we think these are the things we're going to do after we graduate. Yeah. We don't realize, like, maybe 1/10 of 1% of us are going to work on that project. And even if we do, we're not going to be just designing it. We're going to be working on one small detail of the project, probably.
Look, Ara, outside my circle of friends who are international human scale architects, I know people who are regular faculty in architecture schools. I don't work with them, but I know them. They don't get to design anything. They're lucky if they get a local private individual asks them to do a kitchen extension, and they're licensed architects, and they do a kitchen extension, and they get $2,500.
Yeah.
That's as much as your regular architecture faculty expects, if they're lucky. It's all a big deception.
Yeah, it really is, and we all kind of bought into it, and it's like it is a vicious circle. You're right, because we bought into it, and then when we become faculty, we try to push the same architect type of thing on the other students because that's what we didn't get to do in the real world. So the academia becomes the place where we could all be Frank Gehry.
Right.
There's only one Frank Gehry in the world, but in the architecture school, we could all be Frank Gehry.
Right. Okay, time to end this.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. God bless. Take care. End stream.